Good morning, everybody. Okay. Here we are. Let's see. It is, first I'm going to take a sip from I got to do this. I'm left-handed, so normally I would be drinking it like this. But in this specific case, I'm going to take a sip like this. My totally boss, totally wicked, totally kicky Corey Kerr art mug. Okay. What are we doing? Okay, so first, as usual, before we get into updates and everything else, 3 books from the bookshelf. As usual, just sort of randomly plucked. Not randomly, I'm not just like closing my eyes and grabbing them, but I'm just trying not to think about it too much, just trying to find, first of all, books I haven't already talked about, and then also 3 that are just kind of representative of something. Let's see. So I've got Crime and Puzzlement. This is a book so this isn't actually, I thought it was the original copy, but I must have replaced it somewhere along the way. When I was a kid, my mom got this for my dad. And I remember looking through it and loving it. Since lost to time, and I think at some point along the way I must have bought a used version on Amazon. What is Crime and Puzzlement? Let me show you. It's basically little comic booky or cartoony drawings of a crime scene. I want to find some of my favorite ones. Let's see. With all these little details in there. And then on the facing page, a little bit of setup and then a series of questions. And it's like an observation thing. You look at this very closely, and in theory, you can answer these questions and therefore solve the crime. All right. Some of them are pretty far out there, like some of the things like, oh, that woman couldn't possibly have been a typist because her nails are too long. Like just weird kind of, okay, if you say so. But as a kid, I loved the drawings. I loved how some of them were really creepy. Like this dead person in the bathroom. Murder in the bookstore. This guy's got like a bag over his head and a Santa doll sitting on him. I know my camera's not great for this, but you get the idea. Anyway, I always sort of loved it. I actually haven't sat and read through this and tried to solve the puzzles in 20 years. I kind of just like flipping through it for the nostalgia and for the weirdness and uniqueness of the book. So that's number 1. Number 2, flint knapping, making and understanding stone tools. So in a past life, my original major when I got up to Northern Arizona University was archaeology. And I had an archaeology seminar, I think in my first or second semester, I don't remember. It was early though. And I don't remember exactly why I was doing it. It's been a long time now, but I think it was like for extra credit or a long-term project or something. I was learning how to make stone tools out of obsidian, out of flint. If you've never, and who has, other than a weird college student, if you've never tried to make a projectile point or a knife or anything out of obsidian, just rest assured, it is extraordinarily difficult. Not physically, like it doesn't require a lot of force, a lot of strength. Technically, like it makes you appreciate how sophisticated a lot of these primitive people were because you really, there's almost like a level of physics to it. You need to be able to look at the rock you're working on and visualize what kind of thing you're trying to make. And think about like, okay, like the order of operations. First, I want to break off this piece. Then I want to break off that piece. And then I got to do this angle. And this needs to either be a really serious hit or just kind of a touch. Just like, it's a very finessey technical process. I actually really enjoyed trying to get good at it. I never got great at it. I could never make anything like these Clovis points or, you know, like some of the, like I could never make anything on that level. This is crazy craftsmanship on the part of a prehistoric person. But I was able to make some pretty simple daggers and hand axes and small, there's a name for it and I'm blanking on it now, small handheld pieces that you could use to maybe like scrape the inside of a hide. Like I was okay. In my defense, I only worked on it for about a semester, but it was kind of a weird scene in my dorm room because my first college roommate was pre-med, actually, but he was a zoology major. And he had a class, an entomology class, where the semester-long project was he had to collect 50 different species of insect and pin them on this big board with labels. So all semester long, anytime he'd go out on a bike ride or something, he would just bring all these little baby food jars with him. So if he saw an interesting bug, he could catch it. So on his half of the room, he's building this board of dead bugs. And on my side of the room, I have a tarp down so I can like strike stone tools together and end up with all these razor sharp fragments of obsidian. It was, I mean, clearly we were extremely popular with the ladies. Anyway, okay, so flint knapping. And then finally, The Strange World of Your Dreams. This is a collection. People might have seen this on, I think I shared some of this either on my Instagram or my Facebook when I first got it a few years ago. I sort of adore this collection of old comics. The premise was, and I want to get the name exactly right here. One moment, please. Let's see here. Where is it? I want it. This title is very important. I want to make sure I've got it right. Okay, well, let me start with the premise first, but then I want to get on to what is my favorite thing about this. First of all, this was the whole idea. We will buy your dreams. You will receive $25. So the idea is you would send in, you'd write up some crazy dream you had, send it in, and they would, I don't know how you want to describe this, comicize it, you know, they would draw it out. So clearly the weirder the better. Now to me this seems, and I don't know why they stopped doing this comic, I would suspect one of two reasons, or maybe all of the above. Either it's super gameable, like right away you're just going to start writing crazy things that you know they'll pick that is not a dream that you had or anybody would normally have, but you're, you know, would make a good comic. So either that is happening, or you're submitting a dream and these people, they're looking at it and like, you know what would make it really cool is if we added a thing here and changed this here and moved this front part to the back part and whatever, and they're editing it like crazy. And, you know, that's kind of, now you're basically just doing fiction writing, and it's, you've strayed from the concept, which is the most appealing aspect of this. But what I loved about it, so each one, let me find this. This is very important to me. my God, why can't I find this? By the way, Kirby was involved in drawing a lot of these. Oh my God, this is going to drive me bananas. Oh wait, I think I remember. I think I remember how to find it. Oh, whoa, whoa. Oh, whoa, whoa. Ah, there it is. There it is. So, at the end of every story, you see secondary stories, either illustrated like this, or all written like this, about Richard Temple, the dream detective. And the premise is people, it's almost like it's like a Columbo, but a dream detective. People are running into him at parties or intercepting him or calling him at his office or catching him on the subway and saying like, you got to help me with this crazy dream I've been having over and over and over again. And they explain it to him. And then he explains what this means is and gives them like the key to it. They're like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you, dream detective. How can you not love this? Also, what's weird, this has nothing to do with anything, but like this cover, it's like spongy. It's got like foam in there. I don't know why. Am I supposed to, is it a dream thing? Am I supposed to, I don't know. What is, I don't know. Anyway, okay. So those are the 3 books. In terms of DvsM 1979 update, as you probably saw in the subject or the title, this is, as I also talked about last time, this is the awful in between. 79 is, as far as I know, it's according to Comics Wellspring, in production. Haven't seen the proof yet. Waiting. It's a physical proof. Digital proof, I might have seen it already. But physical proof is what I need. So I'm just waiting. I have a giant box of Gemini mailers out there. Those are like the comic mailers. So when I mail a copy or copies of 1979 to you, it stays nice and flat and clean. Also in that vein, bags and boards. I've got some more bags and boards. I also cut together a trailer, a release trailer for DvsM 79. It's a minute and a half long. I'm not going to show it yet because it ends, or near the end, is on sale now. It's not on sale now, and I'm not going to list it this early. Once I get the proof and approve it, even if I haven't gotten my order yet, I'll probably make it available to sale. I'll make it very clear, like, look, this may not ship for a couple weeks, but you can order it now if you want. And that's probably when I would release the trailer. So in short, everything is set. Everything is ready. I'm ready to go. Just waiting for proof to show up and then to approve that, hopefully with no changes, and then order shows up. As I think I mentioned last week, when the proof shows up, I will probably live stream that day. I probably will live stream looking at the proof. And then shortly after that, I would think within just a few days, like once I've approved the proof, then I will probably do a special screening of the release trailer for DvsM 1979, which reveals more than I've shown so far. And that's very difficult for me. I've been looking over the trailer I've made, and it's like, oh, do I want to show that panel yet? But, you know, it's a trailer. You're supposed to build some interest, and I don't feel like it gives too much away. So you know, but it should be fun. I'm happy with how it turned out. I'll probably say this again before the trailer goes, but I am not a video artist, you know, whatever you describe that. I've never made a movie. I don't know. So when it comes to something like cutting together a trailer with music and visuals and transitions and everything, my bar is not amateurish. But that's kind of my bar for all things. It's like, just try to get it out of the range of someone looking at it and saying like, good effort, you know, like try to at least get clear of that. And I think the trailer accomplishes that. I think the trailer it's respectable. I think it'll build some, I think it's cool. I'll be happy to show it. Can't show it yet. Don't have a proof, don't have comments. I'm gonna look at the chat real quick. Scroll back to see your books. No wonder you went into your profession. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely, it's funny, and Didi, you'll appreciate this. I think anyone who's not 25 will appreciate this. I think when you're living your life, you feel like there's an element of just kind of randomness. But once you get older and you look back, you do see the path. There was like some kind of a logical progression through it. I never would have imagined I'd have the job I have now. I didn't even know it was a job like 10 years ago, you know, but now I have it. So it's not like I knew like, oh, I'm working toward being able to do a particular thing. But now having it, looking back, and this is, I think, on some level, it's constructed in your head, but I think you start to organize the narrative in a way that makes the present make sense, if that makes sense. Anyway. Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to having it out and for sale and move on with my life. You mentioned collecting the first 3 or so DvsM books into a compendium or omnibus going forward in the future. When do you think that will materialize? Good question. I'm shooting for end of the year. Around the end of the year, so like probably we're still talking maybe 6 months away. It'll be around the time of the holidays probably. I do intend, anything can change. None of this is set in stone yet. But I do intend to do a trade of the first 3 books, so 75, 97, and now 79, together in a trade paperback. So, you know, like a square bound, you know. It will be the original, the 3 books. I haven't decided yet, but perhaps with some little tweaks and polishes. Not a lot. This is not going to be like DvsM special edition, but especially at this point now, having done this for however long, I don't remember when 75 came out. I want to say it was like 2000. 17, 18? I don't remember. In any case, I've been doing this long enough where sometimes I look back on panels in 75 especially and think that could have been a little bit better. I don't want to redraw anything, but there's a lot of stuff where I think my idea of good enough to move on has changed. I know it's changed since 75. There are a lot of panels in 75 where I look at it, and it's not that I think it's bad. To me, it looks unfinished. I think there was like more, if I was doing it today, there was more I would do. Now, I don't want to get lost in that, and I don't want to spend 4 months redrawing half of DvsM 75. That's not the plan. But there are a couple panels that I can think of in my head where it's like, I might just add a little something to that just to kind of get it a little more consistent with the rest. May or may not happen, but I'm thinking about that. And then for people who have already read those 3 books, to give them something additional, bonus material. So probably will get someone to interview me to talk about the process of making it and, you know, whatever. I don't know exactly what that would be yet. Again, this is still very early on, but something like that. Lots of behind the scenes work product. So screen grabs of SketchUp models I used as reference, or original life references of people posing, you know, and then like the final thing. Or original notes, my first sketch of like Ruben and George in '75, like what I was trying to imagine they might look like. Some of the dead ends of like art styles. There was a point when DvsM was going to be way more cartoony and loose. And I decided now I think I want it tighter and a little more, I don't know what even word I would say, a little more restrained and deliberative, like, I guess, in the drawing. So, you know, there's all that kind of stuff I could throw in there. So it'll be a hunk of a book, but I don't know when that will be. I know it'll be someday, if only because now with 3 floppies, inventory is becoming now a headache. Like even with 2, it was sort of a pain, like when should I reorder? How many should I reorder? How many should I bring to a con? Now with 3, like I'm doing Phoenix Fan Fusion in about a month. My intention is that that's the last one that I'm bringing 3 separate books to. Like it's sort of the first and last. It'll be the first con I'm bringing 3 floppies and maybe the last, because already, like, I've got this order for 79 I'm waiting for. I need to reorder because I'm sold out of 75 and 97. I got to figure out how many of each I think I need. I got to, like, and I just hate that. It's so much simpler. And everyone I talk to who's done this, it's so much easier just to have a trade that has everything you've done so far. And according to everyone I know who's done this, it's far more attractive to buyers, especially in a con. Like, it's far more attractive. Like, you can sell them like, look, I've got these 3 floppies for $12 each or whatever you're selling them for. Or you can get all 3 in this brick of a book with some bonus stuff for 25 or 30 or something like that. And like, people will, that's like, yeah, well, just give me that. It's not that much more. You're getting more. It's like a nice, you know, thing you can put on your bookshelf. So maybe the end of the year. That is probably, again, nothing's decided yet. Probably going to be my first Kickstarter, my first ever Kickstarter. Just because I anticipate the printing costs to be, like, I cash flow everything. I've never done a Kickstarter. I've never done pre-sales to fund printing. Like, I've never done any of that stuff. Like, which is why sometimes inventory is kind of inconsistent. It's like, well, yeah, I'm out right now, but I don't want to place a print order because. So I can manage with floppies a trade where the printing is probably going to be a little bit more and I'll want a supply. That might be a Kickstarter. To sweeten the deal for a Kickstarter, I'm already thinking of like fun extras to add. One is actually already being made. So I am thinking ahead, and like I have ideas for things that I'm trying to, like, things are going on behind the scenes. A lot of big answer for a seemingly simple question. Probably around the end of the year. But I'm not going to commit to a date. I'm not even going to 100% commit that it's going to happen. But that's at least my ambition. Okay. Yeah, there is this is, I'm assuming, about it all making sense once you're there. But almost all my collage work has some element of time. Love the old school sci-fi growing up. Oh, yeah. So see, it's funny how I can't think of, maybe there's something, but I can't think of really anything in my present that would have been entirely unanticipated or unanticipatable. It's not a word, but you know what I mean. When I was a kid. I loved to draw. I loved to make up stories. I liked to dabble in trying to write short stories. I was always very interested in things like science and anatomy and crime and I always loved conspiracy theory isn't the right word, but like contemporary fairy tales, contemporary fables, contemporary folklore, as in like Bigfoot and aliens and the Loch Ness Monster and the Bermuda Triangle, how they build the pyramids, and you know, like all that stuff. So when you take all that and then you look at my life now at 48, it's like, well, of course. But like I said, none of this was, I think compared to most adults I know, have been less intentional in my life than almost anybody. Like I've always been a little bit of like, this is my kind of passion right now, or this is where I am right now. So I'll just walk in this direction for a while and see where I end up. Like I very rarely been like, here's a goal I'm working toward, and I'm going to do years and years of work to get there. That's never been me, for good or ill. Sometimes ill, sometimes good. Yes. Oh, I loved In Search Of so much. You know this. I think you've seen me talk about this before, but In Search Of is, I'll still sit and watch. I'll sometimes when I'm working, there's a YouTube channel that has all of them, like in a playlist, and I'll just hit shuffle and like, just so I can listen to it while I'm working. I love it. It's very comfort foody. Okay. So that's where we're at with DvsM right now. And not to beat a dead horse, but not a great, literally one of my least favorite parts of this process is this little desert in between working like a lunatic for months or years and actually having a book that you can give people. There's a gap in between there that feels entirely too long. Like in a perfect world where time, where things didn't take time, I would finish and push a button, and 3 days later, like Amazon, printed books would show up, and there we go. We're off, and that's just not how it is. And as I think I mentioned last time, it's funny. When it comes to drawing a comic page, I feel extremely experienced, because at this point I've drawn like 160 pages of DvsM, okay? But when it comes to this, making a print order of a new book and waiting for it, that I've only done 3 times. So I'm not very experienced with that part when you think about it. It's funny that this is not my first rodeo, and yet I'm still not a fan of this part. I'm still not comfortable. I still don't know exactly how to navigate it without driving myself a little crazy. I am, but it does feel like, for me, at least personally, it doesn't feel done until I can look at the thing and flip through it. The work is done, but like feeling like, like I got to the top of the mountain. That's when you get it in your hands. So it's like, in some ways I've been sort of celebrating being done. Like I had sort of like being done breakfast and you know, like little like being done type things, but it doesn't really feel like it deep down until I get that book. So almost, but that is, I think, the most satisfaction I'll get out of it. After that will be people like reading it and enjoying it, hopefully. Like that also is a little bit of a hit. Not as high as just the culmination of like work, 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 and then having it. That, I have to admit, that's it. It all goes kind of downhill from there. You know, like you work, 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 work. You get it. You see you're printed the evidence of all this effort. That's the peak. Then you talk to people who like it. That's also really good. Not as good as being done, but like it's really good. And then that kind of starts to drain away. And I think that drop off is somehow related to a new rising interest in like, well, I should make another one. But we'll talk about the next DvsM once I get this one fully officially out the door. But I have a pile right there. You can't see it, it's just out of frame, but a pile of material. Like I have a new pile. If you watch my Instagram or follow my Instagram, you'll see that I boxed up a lot of my old DvsM 1979 stuff to put away. It's now being replaced by a pile of DvsM #4 stuff. So it's, even though I'm not drawing and I'm not even like officially writing the script yet, I have pages and pages of notes and I have a very clear idea of what it is, but I haven't done like, this is the final draft. Even though I'm trying to make myself take a break, like the gears are always turning and I know where I need to go. And so I've already started gathering like, well, I want to read these books before I write the script, so I have a good frame of reference, and here's like a thing I got to go look at, and here's like a visual reference I know I'll need later, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't really have a lot for today, and if no one pops in, like maybe we'll even wrap a little early, which is totally fine. But what I have been still continuing to work through Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It's sort of his musings on creativity and being an artist. And I wanted to just not take a lot of time with it, but pick out little bits that I've been chewing on. I'm still not very far through it. Because I read like a little bit and kind of sit and think about it before I move on. Like I'm not just charging through. So I'm only, I don't know, 25% of the way. Here's my bookmark. But there are some little things in here that have been sticking with me that I've been, the aforementioned, chewing on before I move on and read more of the book, that maybe they would be interesting to some of you. So in one part, he's talking about I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. I'm going to put in my interpretation of some of this. So this is a blend of what he's saying and what I'm thinking about what he's saying. He's talking about, in his words, leveling up your taste. It's in the context of how, like if the goal is to make great art, if the goal is to make a beautiful thing, how are you evaluating whether it's great or beautiful or whatever you're going for, okay? And I think very often as artists, and this isn't necessarily bad, we evaluate our own work on the basis of how close is it to what the idea was, what the picture in our head was. So, you know, whether it's good or bad, it's like, how closely did I achieve what I was going for, okay? But what he's talking about, I think, is something, it's related to that, but it's deeper. It's more, well, how the thing you have in your head, like, okay, you can evaluate your art based on how close it is to what the picture in your head was. Fine. But are you evaluating the picture in your head? Like, you might have a dumb idea, a bad idea, a not very interesting idea, and do it perfectly, exactly how you pictured in your head, and say, like, well, that was a success. It's exactly what I set out to do, but it's not interesting. It's not good. It's not. So the question is, like, how are you developing? There's like the two halves of it. How are you developing good ideas? And then there's the technique side, that's how are you executing them? He talks about, in that regard, leveling up your taste. And as a kind of a suggestion, he doesn't do rules, and none of us do rules. And I think he even makes the point in this, like, rules are for math, for physics. Like, when we're talking about art, like, it's all very soft, like lowercase r rules. But he suggests one thing you could do is just completely immerse yourself in great works for like a year. And rather than read newspaper and watch the news and read blogs or read Twitter, like, take a year just to completely bury yourself in the greatest paintings or the greatest novels, the greatest movies, the all-time agreed upon greatest comic books, whatever the thing is, the greatest music, the greatest classical music, the greatest jazz, whatever. Just try and, like, find this, like, a list of, like, this is the top 100 whatever, and just bury yourself in that for a year. And his argument is that in that, like, each individual work, you may like it, you may not like it. You might see, like, I see why everyone talks about this, and others you're like, I don't really understand why this is on the list. Whatever, that in that process, just naturally, you'll start to develop a sense of what makes something brilliant and what makes something just okay. Not through imitation, not through saying, like, oh, this is what all the great, paintings look like. Now I need to make it like that. But at least allows you to recognize maybe you see the matrix a little bit. I kind of understand what makes something great. And now you can that will just sort of subconsciously seed your own concepts. Again, not in an imitative way, not in a copying way, not in a, like, oh, Van Gogh is great, paint like Van Gogh, not like that. But to start to see something more essential. Okay, again, this is a blend of how I'm interpreting it and what he's saying. I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking a lot about this idea of leveling up your taste, which is how he describes it. I think probably a little narcissistically, in that I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in this idea that the best potential fertilizer you can have in your brain is made, and it's composted from seeing lots and lots of other artwork, and the best and the worst and everything in between. Like, really, really just, and where it's not, you're not picking out specific things, it's blending in your head into this kind of larger impression of what people are doing and why some things work and why other things don't. And anyway, I like I said, I've been thinking about that a lot, in addition to a few of these other things. This is another one. I don't have as much to say about it because I think it sums it up. He's talking about artists as in a struggle between the desire to share work versus the fear of judgment. And that we're all kind of trying to balance those two things. And that a lot of artists, the fear of judgment actually prevents them from getting any work out there. But even the artists that are putting work out there, that never goes away, this fear, this vulnerability in that you're doing it. And then this is the push and pull. This is the tug in opposite directions. And even though I tend to think reducing stuff like that to simple, like, these are the two poles, is not maybe necessarily literally true. I think it's a good framing way to think about it. And that's one I keep going back to. I do think about it. There's a level of, but it also, and this is without getting into specifics, it made me think about artists who hold back in their art to minimize their fear, and how I think that is actually like a terrible way to deal with it. I think it's almost preferable to be too afraid to share your work and do great work, like do honest, unrestrained work, than to like be a little timid or prudish or even cowardly in your work in the attempt to make it less less scary to share it. I think that's something I've been chewing on too. So that's a good motto. This is one, I don't know what to do with it. And for some reason, it made me think of Josh Kimball because it seemed like something that he would respond to. He's talking about the conventions in art, assumed rules that are rules in art that are adopted because of convention, not because they're deliberately chosen, and not because they necessarily make the art any better. It's just, this is how you do it. What's an example? A pop song needs to be 3 to 5 minutes long. Like, there are reasons for that. None of them have anything to do with making a great song, okay? Like, it's all like, there's commercial reasons, there's economic reasons, there's making it accessible to an audience reasons. It's like all this kind of, it's considerations that have nothing to do with, is the best song you can make 3 to 5 minutes, you know? And it made me think of examples where deviating from that, even in a small way, becomes like, it just opens it up for mockery or outlier status or whatever. Like, so I think Martin Scorsese's got a new movie coming out. It's going to be like 3.5 hours or something. And already I follow a lot of movie sites. They're all like talking about it in like hushed tones, as in like, oh, this has disaster written all over it. You know what? Operas are like 4 hours. I think Wicked is like 4 hours. Like, it just shows that like, movies are 90 to 120 minutes. That's the rule. Like, whoa. Why, like with Avatar, we saw it too. Why is it so long? Like, it shows, and you see people like kind of making fun of it, especially on the internet, which is made for people just being kind of glib and superficial and stupid. Like, people reacting to that and rejecting it on the basis of that. Well, this is going to be hot garbage. It's too long. Where when you think of it, that is a completely nonsensical, meaningless way to evaluate something. Like, you know, movies are, everybody knows, the movie is 90 to 120 minutes. And so he's talking about these kind of weird assumptions, like this is, so I was thinking like, well, how does this relate to comics? We operate with panels, like that's how it's done. The format, like the comic format, like the pages turn this way, you know, it's, like, and you could imagine, like, if I put out a comic, if DvsM opened like a legal pad, it opened up, that would be half the conversation about DvsM. And I think it's kind of a proof of this, like, the absurdity of, as artists, we're trying to push boundaries or ignore boundaries, stretch rules, think outside the box, go in directions other people aren't going. But there is this kind of weird tension there, where not too much, don't go crazy, which So I've been thinking about that a lot. It's like, what are the things? And now I feel like, in my own small way, I do ignore a lot of comic rules. And one that I think I talked about with Scott Lost last week was there's sort of a convention in comics like don't do talking head panels. Talking head panels are where you just have like a picture of a person or two people just talking and there's no like real other thing going on. Obviously, if you've read a DvsM, I think that's a giant load of horse shit. Like, that's ridiculous. I am in the execution camp. Any comic can be a fun comic to read if you do it right. You don't have to do any of this stuff, like according to Hoyle, you know, like whatever the edict is. This is how Kirby did it. This is how Jim Lee would draw a thing. Like, fine. That has nothing to do with me or what I'm trying to do. I think, I mean, it's a little weird to say, I think DvsM is pretty unique among comics. I haven't read any other comics that to me it's like, oh, this is very DvsM-y. Oh, this person is doing exactly what I'm trying to do. So I think on some, for, you know, successful or not, in some way, I think DvsM is kind of, it dismisses a lot of conventions about comics. On the other hand, it's like this. It reads like a book. There are panels, dialogue bubbles. Like, it's very recognizably a comic book. For all its deviations, for all its dismissal of rules, no one would mistake it for anything but a comic book. That's not necessarily bad, and I do think there's an argument for, if you're making art, it needs to be recognizably a category of art to an audience. You know, like you could do an oil painting on the sidewalk in front of your house. No one's going to recognize that as a painting. Like, you know, like you have, if you're assuming you want people to actually understand it in some kind of framework, you'll make some concessions. I think that's different, though, than just accepting rules that you've never thought about and you've never questioned. Anyway, let's see here. Just as I know, yes, he does. Yeah, that's true. And I think, I'd have to think about this, but off the top of my head, right now, off the cuff, it's probably my favorite thing about Josh as an artist, like his work, is that there's a frankness to it. And you don't get that sense of, so when we talked about before, fear of judgment versus desire to share. If he has a fear of judgment, he's managed to tamp it down and pull it back far enough that you don't see it. I've never gotten that impression from his work, that he's like demurring, you know, from, I don't want to reveal this. Like, this is a little too personal. This is like a thought I had that I'm not comfortable putting out there for everyone to read. Like, I've never gotten a whiff of that in his work. May or may not be happening, but the important thing is I don't get a whiff of that. And I think that's admirable. Yeah, I haven't done every kind of art, so I can't say, but what I can tell you is, having done now 3 comics, they are not easy. We'll say that. Yeah. Okay. And I think I have one more thing I wanted to call out in the Rubin book. Oh, this I didn't even mark the page. I just sort of remembered. And this is another thing that I could relate to, and that's why I'm sticking on it. On he's got a little, they're chapters, but they're very short, like 3 pages, 2 pages, some of them. One is on collaboration, which my gut reaction is like, well, That's not something I do with this, like, because I'm doing everything myself. I'm thinking up an idea, I'm doing all the research, I'm writing the script, I'm planning it out, I'm drawing it, I'm self-funding the printing. Like there's, you know, there's a little collaboration in the sense that like sometimes I'll have people read over a script just to get their thoughts. Sometimes I'll have people look at a page like, does this look right? Whatever, but it's ultimately like I'm the guy and I have all the final decisions. I might get feedback like, oh, I would change the wording of the sentence, and I'll look at it and be like, no, it's fine. You know, so like not a lot of collaboration with DvsM, but the way Rick Rubin thinks of it is all art is collaboration in the sense that it is a response or a reaction or like a launching point from all art that has come before it. And it will then be something that whoever experiences your work, they will now be reacting to, responding to, contradicting, or amplifying, or yes-anding, or whatever they're doing. That you may be working alone day to day, but it's collaborative in the sense of its participation in the larger thing that is art. That unless you're making work quietly in your room, not telling anybody about it, and when it's done, burying it in the backyard, like it's become now a part of the thing, a part of the conversation. So that all art is collaborative in the sense that all participation in a conversation is. That I may be monologuing right now, but it's in response to something that you said. And then I had a thought. Now I'm saying the thing. Even if I'm monologuing, even if I'm not even listening to what people are saying. And now other people are reacting to what I said. And so in that sense, all art is collaborative. The reason that struck a chord with me is, especially when I'm writing a script and trying to decide like what would be cool, what do I want to see in this? Some of it goes back to the taste thing. Like, what do I think would be neat? Like, what do I think would be fun? What is something I've never seen in a comic before? And I would, you know, that would be kind of interesting. What's something that you would expect a character to do in this case? But what would be maybe an interesting, different way to go? Like, you know, you're trying to think of something that's like, again, more than what your taste. What do I think is good? What do I think is beautiful? What do I think is exciting? What do I think is scary? Etc. But I have to admit, and I've talked about this before, but I always feel a little embarrassed by this. Some of my creative choices are reactions to work, reactions to things in other works that I don't like. And I would never call out specific artists or specific writers or specific movies or whatever. But sometimes we've all had this experience. Maybe, I don't know, maybe me more than others, but I think everybody's had this on some level. Let's say you're reading a comic and it's like, you see this thing they're doing in the comic. And you think to yourself, this is so hacky. They always do this. Not just this person, but comics. They always have this thing. Why do they love doing this thing? It's stupid and it's tired. We've seen it 1,000 times. If I did a comic, I would never do this. That voice figures into my script writing a lot. And so I guess like to Rick Rubin's mind, in a way that's collaboration. In a way it's my reaction to previous work is kind of guiding my work. It's not in isolation. It's not me just sitting and imagining a comic completely irrespective of every other comic and movie and piece of art that exists in the universe. Like, it's very much informed by that. I've seen a lifetime of movies. I've read a lifetime of books. I've read a lifetime of comic books. And just, there's no way for me to not have that in there when I'm trying to come up with what's a good or bad comic. Let's see here. Philip. Good to see you, Philip, and I'm glad you're here. Let's see here. You know what not to do, what you don't like, so you don't. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, like I said, I don't know why I'm hung up on that. I don't know why I feel like sometimes I have to be a little embarrassed to admit that. And I have to assume, nothing wrong with that voice, it is a discernment. I agree. I have to assume that we all, either unconsciously or not, that is kind of an operating principle when we're working. You know, like you're painting a painting, and it's like everyone always makes, you know, this kind of thing. Everyone wants to make this look really bright and colorful. I'm going to do muted. Like there's some sort of a reaction of like, I think this is bad, or I'm tired of seeing this, or it's played out, or I think it's unartful, like inartful, like it's just sort of clunky, like it's never worked for me. It's like a trope. Actually, that would be a good example. To this day, like movies love this. They love it. TV too. The idea of knocking someone out. There's a guard at a post somewhere. Someone comes up behind him and hiya! Chops him on the back of the head. And they, oh. And they go and rob the bank or run off with the secret plans or whatever the thing is. Nothing will check me. That's one of the things that will check me out of a movie or a show immediately. It's so stupid. It's so hacky. It's so not reflective of anything in real life. It's a total writing crutch. I believe, just to, you know, do a little self-righteous art rant here. Anyone's doing that, that's a good example of like a weird, it's a narrow example, but of a Rick Rubin rule. It's like this thing you just take for granted that like, oh, this is a thing that happens in movies and shows. And you're not thinking about it. You're not thinking about how dumb it is and how not real it is. And how, but yet we all just accept it. We all, like, mostly, except for this guy and some other people, I'm sure. But like, you know, every time I see that movie, I'm like, it's just so, I can't believe we're still doing this Tom and Jerry nonsense. And yet it's just a thing. So like when I go to write a script, that's not an option available to me or my characters. It can't be like, then he knocks them out. Another one, just similar but different. A love scene where a woman gets out of bed and wraps the bedsheet around her like a toga. I can't believe we're still doing this. I've not to get into the gritty details. I have never seen that in my life, in real life. That's not a thing. I don't believe that's a thing. And it's certainly not common enough for me to see it in every goddamn movie I've ever seen. Like why are we still doing this? Why? How can you write that in good conscience? Like that's an example of something where it's like, this is silly. This is silly we're doing this. And then you can think of all sorts of other more like subjective examples where it's like, I don't like it where this is always the turn with the villain, or I don't like it. Here's another one. Drives me bananas. To me, this is bold. I apologize if someone who's watching, a friend of mine or something, has used this before. None of us are perfect. Every time you have a speech from the villain saying to the hero, we're not so different, you and I. Like, to me, that's just bad writing. It's just bad writing. It might have been okay the very first time it was done, whenever that was. It's too well trodden. Throw that shit out. It's bad. That's the stuff that does inform me when I'm writing. I'm thinking like, well, I'm not doing that. Whatever I'm going to do, I'm not making these stupid choices that I feel like are overdone or overused or just don't make sense anyway. According to Rick Rubin, collaboration. That's collaboration. Okay, check it out. I know you don't like when I speak, but I've been here too. Good to see you, Squatch. see here. I was just thinking the same thing when I was watching an old Star Trek episode. Captain Kirk knocked everyone out. Yeah. But it's an example of how we just don't even question it anymore. Like, most of us. Like, it is like panels in a comic book. We just sort of accept that this is how the art form works, you know? And those are, I think, the rules, rather than like, oh, I want an unconventional comic format. I want it to open like a legal pad. I don't want panels. Every image is going to flow into the other like a weird mural, like, which sounds pretty cool, by the way. But like, I'm not, me personally as an artist, I don't have a lot of ambitions. Like, that's not really my creative goal, is to redefine comics. Like, that's not, someone else can do that. I would love to read it, but I'm not really interested. Like, that doesn't have to be me. I am very interested in blowing up tropes. Like, I would like to think that there's almost, I'm thinking, I'm going through 75 and 97 and 79 in my head. I think that I would like to think that the flow of those stories and the plot elements and the like moment-to-moment action has a minimum, or ideally zero, of these kinds of chunks and pieces you've seen all the time in other things. You know, I'm always trying not just to subvert and not just to misdirect. Like, I'm not interested in just like, you think it's going this way? Well, ha, tricked you. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm trying for myself. I'm not trying to bamboozle you. I'm trying to get myself out of that hacky, hoary old framework. I'm trying to break out of this, what I've talked about before, like the Roman roads of storytelling. This idea of like, if you're going to tell a heist story, well, there's the planning scene, and then they get there, and then something goes a little wrong, and then one, you know, stabs the other one in the back, and like the other person, like, we all kind of can imagine the same story. And it's, I think, the burden on the writer to come up with a new way to tell that story by recognizing, like, we always do it this way. It's always this, and this always happens, and then it always ends up here. How, like, can we retire any or all of this? That's what I'm trying to do. Yes. Yes. Which, by the way, in the script, it was like the Roman road story. Like, oh, we're going to have a gun versus sword, or a whip versus sword fight. That was the original script. There was going to be this whole extended thing. It's according to, you know, the myth. Harrison Ford was tired. It was a long day of shooting. He was hot, and he like kind of joked, like, what if I just shoot him? And everyone, and you know why they liked it better? Because it's not the thing you've seen every time, or not the obvious thing. Like, yes. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's probably like the first time someone got knocked out in a movie to slip by, or the first time a villain said, we're not so different, you and I, like, to the hero. Like, the first time, sort of interesting. The 18th time, this is stupid now. And you should be embarrassed. You should be, have you watched movies, man? Like, I can't believe we're still doing this. And I, like, for example, I mean, just as, I know that there's been more recent examples than this, but I remember the last time it really annoyed me was Captain America: First Avenger, which is a movie I overall really liked. But you had to have the stupid scene where Red Skull is telling you, you and I are not so different. It's like, oh. Again, it's like the Wilhelm scream. It's like, why are you doing this? I am. Just impatient. Just want those books in hand, put on sale, and close this chapter of my life. I think sometimes it is, and I think sometimes it is kind of like the Wilhelm. Is it Wilhelm or Wilhelm scream? You know, the one with Google it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll know. People now work it in as like a running gag, which I mean, I'm glad they're amusing themselves. As an audience member, it checks me out entirely every time I hear it. Like, so it's like, why, rather than amuse yourself, why don't you be proud of yourself for doing something different? Why don't you? I'm sorry. This is where I can get like a little snooty about, like, come on. Like, I do prize originality. I really do. And so it kind of aggravates, annoys, checks me out, pisses me off when I feel like, oh, man. Let's see. See, that's kind of funny. But don't put it in a movie. Retire it. It's done. It's done. Okay. Like I said, I think that's all I've got today. There were like I said, when the proof shows up, there'll be a live stream of that, and there'll be probably no warning, so you might not catch it live. Maybe I'll give people like a half-hour one, like a post on my Facebook and Instagram, like proof in hand, going live in 30 minutes to look it over. Whenever that is, probably will be midweek because they'll show up in the mail. I don't know. Once the proof is approved, I will schedule the trailer release, which will be an on sale now thing, which will have a link to the listing on Etsy to order. It's not going to be a normal Etsy shipping thing because, like I said, if I make it all live when I've approved the proof, I'm still waiting now for them to finish printing comics and ship them. Might be a couple weeks, and Etsy is usually like, you know, shipping 3 to 5 days. I will make that very clear on the listing. I don't want people to be like, where the hell is my book? It's been a week. Well, I'm probably still like packaging them up. So, but I just want to like make it so if people want to get in their order and not think about it anymore, that will be available. I think, I don't know, it's not confirmed, my good friend Jim Lujan, who is a video guy more than I am, I ran the trailer by him to kind of just whatever, you know, any reaction. And without getting too much in the details, he enjoyed it. And he said that he had a bunch of questions about it, a bunch of questions of the making of it, like how I did different things and how I made different decisions and all that. And I said, if you really do have a bunch of questions you want to ask about the trailer, why don't we save them for the trailer debut? And you can come on and we can talk about the trailer. So that's probably what will happen. There'll probably be a screening of the trailer, and then sometime shortly after that, talking about the making of the trailer, which is kind of funny, but let's see here. I am too. Feels good. This was the toughest one yet. It was a slog. And something I'll probably talk about in a future show, or maybe I'll say everything I need to say about it right now. There was a longer gap between 97 and 79 than I would have wanted for all sorts of reasons. Like, I think 97, I didn't pace myself right. My mentality was a little wrong, and I was really burned out after 97, and I needed more time to recover. And then there was like COVID and lockdowns, and then I was moving, and there was all this stuff that kind of just dragged out the time between these last two books. Ideally, And what I'm going to be trying to do in the future is probably like I'm going to be trying to hit like a book every other year. I think that's reasonable. So, and I've already talked about this a little bit, my kind of sketched out hope. So obviously we have a book coming out this year, 23. 24 will not be a book because in 24 I'll be drawing the next one. My hope would be to be releasing DvsM for like ideally, I don't know yet because I haven't written it. I don't know how long it'll be, and I don't know what what I'm in for. But ideally, coming out early 2025, and then kind of maintain that sort of pace where it's like a book comes out, there's a year of no book while I'm kind of working on the next book, and then the next book comes out after that, the following year. So, yes, I know it's been a while since the last one. Squatch actually told me how long it was. It was the last stream. And I was kind of shocked when I saw it written out. I was like, has it really been that long? And I had to kind of sit and do the math myself. And yeah, it's been a while. Now, and this isn't, I don't want to say in my defense, because I don't feel the need to defend myself. Like it is what it is. But to explain, so yes, all the things I described. And then also just remember, like, and I think even other comic artists, I'm not worried about them being uncomfortable with this. These books aren't as easy to do as a lot of comics. I mean, first of all, there's just the sheer length, okay? 79 is 60 pages long. Most comics are like, 20, 25 pages, something like that. So just all there, okay, so think of it that way. Like I'm sort of doing like 3 books, 2 or 3 books, when a lot of people are putting out one. There's also just, I would imagine, I haven't done any other kind of comic, but just looking at them, a ton more research that goes into DvsM than your average superhero comic. Part of that is because it's a period thing that I'm striving for accuracy. Accuracy is important to DvsM. The idea of DvsM is that this is all real. This all happened. And like those little historical details are important. It's part of that whole thing. Like, this is in this one, 1979. What does 1979 look like? What are people wearing? What kind of phones do they have? What kind of pens were they using? What did a coffee maker look like in 79? Like I'm having to answer those questions, and it's important to me for like the world I'm building to answer them correctly, okay? If I'm doing Vigilante Superhero Comic number 482 billion, I don't have to do any of that work. It's at present day, it doesn't even matter. Nobody cares if that's not, it's this, I've designed myself into a corner with DvsM where like the requirements are heavier. And then as an extension to that, the amount of research, amount of accuracy, I also have high research subjects in them. I got aliens, which requires at least some familiarity with all the lore. But what's worse, like what really ends up being the monster, no pun intended, are the dinosaurs. Like if you're doing a period comic, accurate to a certain era, with humans that look like human beings, and coffee makers that look like the coffee maker you'd see in 79, and weapons that actually look correct, you can't put Barney in there. Like it needs to be a dinosaur that looks like an animal, like looks like a real animal that walked the earth at one point. And that alone is a monster of a research project and a drawing project. I have to say, like, and I think I've said this many times before, nothing gives me as much anxiety as any time I have to draw a dinosaur in these books. And in this book, 79, avoiding spoilers, there's a lot of a dinosaur in it. So it's just like, I'm sorry, they're slow. Think of them as movies. You're not going to get sequels every few months. Like, you know, it takes time. I appreciate the people who, you know, like the books, and when a new one comes out, they're excited to buy it. And, you know, and I understand, I do, and I don't mean this in a kind of a glib way. People who love them and they wish they came out faster and they, you know, they get impatient. Like, I get it. You know, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, that's just like, that's DvsM, and the fact that, remember, I have a day job. Like, and just trust me that so much of my free time, the vast majority, goes into getting these done. Like, I'm kind of like, this is about as good as it gets. The best hope is that future ones are not as long as some of these. Because it really is like, at the end, where the rubber meets the road, it's like it's the page a week rate that's slow. Like, that's the place that takes the most time. If you're doing a 60-page comic, 60 weeks is a long time to be drawing it, and that you haven't even budgeted for writing the script, doing the research, getting all your materials ready to go, doing your page planning, doing all your thumbnails, like all that. Like, you can imagine very quickly it gets to be a couple of years since a book has come out. I wish they were faster too. The idea that I may not finish this series until my late 50s, like, I don't love that. I wish I could just sort of, I dream of Jeannie this shit, and, you know, and like, it's done, but I don't know. Yes, I agree. I think I remember. I mean, I love all my art friends I've met through this journey, but I feel I'm lucky to have crossed paths with Jim Lujan. We have a lot of fun talking. I was working on something a while back with him. Yeah, I do actually really, and that's something I hope that doesn't get buried in the rant. I'm just explaining why it takes a long time. Obviously, I love it. Like, I really enjoy it. And actually, the research, the writing and the research and all of that, like getting everything ready to go to draw, after that moment of like, okay, so I've already said my favorite part of the entire process is getting the physical proof of this thing you've been working on and getting to see it for the first time. All this work you've done for years in some cases now is a thing. And you can open it and read it. You see all these drawings you did for months. You see all that, like, it's all real now. Like, that is the peak moment. My next favorite part is people reading it and enjoying it. Okay. My third favorite part, and these are all very close, but my third favorite part is this, doing the research and writing. I love to write. I love to like drill down, and I get excited when it's stupid, but like, for example, this next one, I needed to know something about hunting rifle, big game hunting rifles, okay? And as soon as I realized that, when I'm sketching out ideas and trying to figure out like, okay, there'll be something like this and something like this, and then this will happen, and, you know, I'm roughing it out. I'm not at the script writing stage yet. It's more like getting all my ideas. I saw is it Jordan Peele? I know it's Peele. I can't remember his first name. I saw a quote of his just the other day. He's like, I try to remember at the first draft, all I'm trying to do is get sand in the sandbox, and I can make, like, making pretty sandcastles comes later. I'm just trying to get that's kind of the stage I am with the final 3 books, really, where I have documents for each one, and I just, every time I have an idea, like something like this, I'm just putting sand in the sandbox. Something like this, something like this. Anyway, for the next one, I knew I needed to know something about big game hunting rifles. And every time I realize there's a thing that will mean research, because I don't know anything about that, Like that's going to be a whole research project. I get very excited. Like I love that's going to be a fun project for me to learn about that. And there's, with each one of these DvsMs, there are dozens of things like that. Dozens of weird little things where it's like, what was this like? What does that look like? I need to draw this. I don't know what that looks like. What were they using in that year? What were they wearing? How was their hair? Where is this happening? What's, you know, that was one with 79. Like, where is this? Having to actually pin it down. Where did this happen? And make it make sense. Do the research to figure out, I know it needs to be something like this. This is not a spoiler so much. I mean, because I've talked about DvsM 1979 is about scientists working in a secret lab. Where would a secret lab be in Arizona? And like going down that path. Well, it'd probably be on a military base in this case. Where are the military bases? Where's a military base with a research facility that would have been active sometime in the 70s or 80s? And then you get your list is getting narrower and narrower, and then you're like picking like, okay, well, what would be an interesting part of the state, or where would, you know, like, that's really fun for me, you know. And then once you pick one, are there pictures? Can I find pictures from 1979 in this place? What did it look like? Who guards a military base? Is that Army? Like, if it's an Army base, is it Army guards? Or are there other branches on site? What rank? If I have a guard at a post, what would his rank be? What's correct? Like, this is how it takes a few years. It's not as simple as like, dude with a cape punching another dude. That's easy. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming by. I am going to cross my fingers and hope that the next time I see you, it will be to talk about the proof of DvsM 1979 in my hot little hands. That's my hope. Let's all see if we can kind of collectively manifest that. Let's all just scrunch our eyes real hard and make that a thing. In the meantime, like I said, I'm ready to go. I've got my bags, I got my boards, I got my Gemini mailers, I got my trailer. Everything's ready. Just waiting. So in the meantime, I don't know. I might just watch some movies and play some video games and read some books and try not to think about it. It was good to see you all. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you, Swatch. Thank you, RJC. Was anybody else here today? I think that might have been that. That might have been everybody. I think there was some, I could tell from the viewers, there were times where it spiked where there's probably more people that just were anonymously watching. Thank you for everyone who's rewatching. Just waiting. Sucks. Pick up Rick Rubin's book. It's good. It's good if you're a creative. Good luck with whatever your projects are, those of you who are doing the same thing, and I will see you next time.